I'm Daniel Crawford, the host of the Inequality Chronicles, and welcome back to yet another episode. Tonight's stories: We've Fallen and Can't Get Up, Flu Stew, How Low Can You Go, and Stagnant Graduates. Story number 1. We've Fallen and Can't Get Up. The article's title: OSHA Chief: Inequality in America is about workplace hazards too. The source is NBC News. The author is Seth Freed Wessler, and the date of its publishing was July 14th. The bullet points: David Michaels, the man in charge of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, sees work safety as a key area of concern in the issue of inequality, since workplace-based injuries or illnesses can drastically affect one's ability to maintain or improve their economic status. As he points out, one bad experience at work can have a tremendous impact on what may already be a difficult life, both in future work pursuits and in their personal lives. Moreover, Mr. Michaels notes how a lack of safety is all too common in low-paid jobs, which only creates a risk to their dreams of ever living in the dream. Part of the challenge in OSHA's efforts to help offset some of the sting of inequality is that its regulations are dependent on increasingly outdated standards. In this respect, a perpetually gridlocked Congress only hurts the administration's mission moving forward. Now, excuse me. I've been off and on with this the past month. I took an extended break near 4th of July, and it's been about 2 weeks since the last time I had an episode of this. But either way, I still got to comment on these things because I consider this to be one of the more vital issues, if not the more vital issue in our country. And of all, the issue of workplace safety is pertinent to matters of inequality, as you hear from the chief of OSHA. You know, a lot of people take for granted the purpose of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, but it really is an important aspect of our government. And by all means, every government throughout the planet should have one, and just to safeguard people's safety. But if it is being underfunded, and if its regulations aren't being modernized to fit today's challenges in the workforce, at the same time we're being forced to live with a government that is dysfunctional, what good does it serve us? Because as you heard him say, it's true. All it takes is one bad incident at work, and then you could be stuck in a less than preferable part of the economic ladder for the rest of your existence. Which, as we've discussed in previous episodes, the economic status that your children are born with could very well determine what their future is, and so forth and so on. So if you end up getting trapped or getting thrown down to the lowest end of the economic ladder, you could very well be putting a sentence of poverty on your loved ones for generations to come. You just could. So this is something that needs attention. We need to do more to safeguard ourselves at work. So take note of that. Story number 2. Flu Stew. The article's title: These food workers have to work while sick, a risk to all of us. The source is CNN Money. The author is Patrick M. Sheridan, and the date was July 14th. Excuse me. The bullet points: The CDC is insistent upon laborers not going to work when they are feeling ill, because of the risk it poses to both the individual worker as well as to the public as a whole. What's disturbing is that the one area where you would most want a sick employee to stay home, the food industry, is comprised of workers who can't choose to call off. because 70% of them already don't get paid enough and are lacking in paid sick days. According to the CDC, these sick food industry workers not staying home is a contributing factor to the worst foodborne illnesses, including the stomach bug known as norovirus. While some companies in some states have taken it upon themselves to offer paid sick days, the risk of losing pay or one's job continues to hang over the heads of workers who should be taking time away from when their body isn't at its best. This goes back to the previous story, in a way, because workplace illnesses, well, it usually involves like developing cancer or something to that effect, based on what you are affected by at work. But this too, if you have some kind of illness that already makes you weak, like some kind of immune disease, immunodeficiency or something, not just AIDS, but anything that weakens your immune system, you go to work and you have to live with that already as it is. If other people come to work and they're sick, that affects you. I mean, not just your customers, but your other coworkers. So, by forcing people to go to work sick, I mean, you're not really telling them you have to come to work sick, but by giving them no choice but to do so because they don't have any paid sick leave and don't get paid enough as it is, you're creating the conditions for epidemics, or at the very least for your other coworkers to have to miss work, or for them to come to work sick. I mean, it doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't make the workplace any better. I mean, here in Ohio, we had a brief moment back in, I think it was 2008, where we were pushing for paid sick leave. And then our governor at the time he negotiated with the movement that was pushing for that, and he got them to drop the effort. Enough pressure from businesses in the area, because they didn't want to pay that. And the reality is, the United States is very far behind the rest of the world when it comes to paid sick leave. But this is an issue of inequality. I mean, the better type of job you have, the more likely you are to have paid sick leave, or at least to make enough money to where you don't have to worry about what missing work because of an illness would do. And, it's just that. Even if you're not going to provide paid sick leave, at the very least, give people some leeway when they're sick. Give some weight, to doctors' excuses. And if need be, if you're worried about people just manufacturing a doctor excuse, copy and pasting or something like that, then make it to where we have to change laws or something to where an employer can at least communicate with the doctor to make sure that the patient was there. Not to talk about why they were there, but just make sure that patient was there. If you're insecure or something about whether people are lying about going to the doctor, something has to change. People have to be able to be comfortable with the thought of missing some work just to get better, so that way they don't spread an illness like wildfire. Otherwise, people are never going to be able to get out of the rut that they're in. Story number 3. How low can you go? The article's title, U.S. Jobs, Slim Pickings. The source is the Financial Times. The author is James Polity, and the date was July 20th. The bullet points. Recent annual wage growth at 2% has trailed the annual productivity growth of 3.5%. The Federal Reserve, which has been the one part of our federal government to consistently be acting in a manner that stimulates the economy via holding interest rates low ever since the 2008 crash, is getting antsy about gradually raising rates to tame inflation. Even as a number of employers are feeling a slight amount of pressure to try and keep the employees they have via improved benefits and pay, far too many remain reluctant to follow suit in the areas where doing so would make a major difference. Much of this lost economic clout can be attributed to the fact that low-wage work made up 22% of the jobs lost during the recession, but 44% of those regained, as high-paying jobs were 41% and 30% respectively. I'm breezing through this, I know, but because, as I mentioned in an earlier episode, I don't want to just drone on and on, so I just want to get to the point. If I have a bigger point to make, then I will. But anyways, on this, there's this weird thing going on right now where we have a lot of paranoia. Like it's been existent on the right wing since 2009. You know, they didn't care about inflation at all when their guy was in office. But you know, once someone from the other side gets in office, you know, they suddenly switches a light on. But anyways, the Federal Reserve is getting a little bit paranoid about inflation. Meanwhile, there's not enough wage growth going on to support the economy's continued growth. I understand the Federal Reserve wants to return back to where it thinks it needs to be, because since the 1980s, or at least late 1970s, the Federal Reserve has been geared towards taming inflation. We had the astronomical inflation of the 1970s and even 1960s. You can kind of understand that, but the thing is, the economy is not growing fast enough. It's growing, but not fast enough. And when you see that last figure there regarding low wage work, you know, outpacing high wage work, it creates a concern, because the inability of the working class, of the working people, to come to the negotiating table on an equal footing, you know, that inability has become more and more apparent with the downfall of unions over time, which has been somewhat orchestrated by those who don't want unions around, obviously. But what the people who don't want unions around fail to remember is that when you get rid of the unions, or you weaken their ability to have a say, weaken the people's ability to have a say in the workforce, then those people lose a lot of economic power. And when you lose economic power, it affects your ability to live, let alone to be a consumer. So, yeah, I understand. You want to tame inflation. But by all means, don't forget about what got us to the point where we were the biggest economy in the world. History has to play a factor here. We have to care about, improving our job situation, improving our pay situation, before we start worrying about inflation. When our economy is robust, then shift your focus to inflation. We're not at that point yet. These concerns are premature. Alright. Final story. Story number 4. Stagnant Graduates. Article's title: New college grads' wages are growing slower than everyone else's. The source is the Huffington Post via Reuters. The author is Ann Sapphire. The date of its publishing was July 21st. The bullet points: new college graduates are trailing the rest of the workforce in post-recession wage growth. The recession-empowered employers to set tougher standards for new hires to attain the status that they desire, as opposed to the workers they already had. Also disturbing is the fact that recent college graduates account for a growing percentage of those not working full-time. Overall, current college graduates, while still earning more than their non-college educated peers, will require more time to earn back the cost of their education than those who graduated during boom years. In a way, as you can see, I try to create a theme, a common theme throughout these episodes. At least I have been for the past few, wherein each of the stories kind of bleeds into the next in a way. The previous story, as you remember, it dealt with lost clout, and that sort of connects to this issue of how college graduates in the modern era don't really have a lot of say. are virtually powerless. I should say we, because I'm a recent college graduate. And we are just virtually powerless in the workforce right now. And it's because the employers, emboldened by the weakness of the economy after the recession and how desperate the workforce is to be able to find work, they are jumping on that. They're capitalizing on that. After all, capitalism. It's what happens in this type of economic system. I get it. You try to get more bang for your proverbial buck. But the problem is that this isn't helping the millennials or any future generations. It's only helping those who are in power economically and even politically. I mean, you heard in the second bullet point there that these tougher standards for climbing up the ladder through a job, through an occupation, they're being applied to new hires, including these college graduates. Whereas these employers, they know they can't get away with that with the employees that they have already. Because those employees came up during a time when workers had more clout. Therefore, they're more willing to fight. And we have to stop this trend of the working class losing its power. Working people losing their say. We just have to. And the notion that, college is still worth it because you're going to still earn more than those who didn't go to college. I believe college is worthwhile. But we can't have these two things at once. We can't have, college become more essential in order to make a living wage, but at the same time, it become more and more expensive and harder to pay off over time. Because all you're doing is you're raising the bar. That's all you're doing is raising the bar and just making it harder for everyone to survive. I mean, it's just this constant race, a never-ending race to get across that finish line. At what point does the race become too long to ever complete? I mean, people have to have hope that they will make it. And if you raise that bar too much, that hope goes away. And then, where's the motivation? Let's do better. To recap, inequality can become a trap created by the unsafe conditions under which you are forced to work with low-paying jobs, because getting hurt or sick on the job could very well inhibit your ability to find better opportunities. Sorry. Thanks primarily to the danger of losing a source of income or having a shortened paycheck, too many laborers, particularly those working with food, are compelled by their need to pay the bills to work while they are ill. The economic recovery's sluggish pace is mostly suffering from an overemphasis on the less preferable jobs, as the pitiful pay involved isn't sufficient to enable those paid to be adequate consumers. And the pressure for increasing wages lags even while the Federal Reserve plans to reverse its eased monetary policy. While the cost of higher education is increasing, and while the need for such also increases, college graduates have to work harder to pay off their debts and have less opportunities for full-time gainful employment than ever before. Now, I'm going to briefly, this is usually my closing comments section, but from time to time, the closing comments is going to be replaced by something else. And that's going to be a new segment I'm going to be introducing today called, it's going to be based on the Occupy movement in a way, which is what brought about this show in a way, because it helped bring the national focus to inequality. But it's a new segment called Mic Check. So, for this, the first edition of Mic Check, I want to highlight something that's going on right now to help address inequality and, heck, any issue you care about. because it's about restoring and strengthening our democracy. You've heard me reference this in the past. You've seen me wear shirts in the past where, references the movement to amend the Constitution to clarify that money is not speech and corporations are not people. I am personally involved here in Newark in a group that I was the original organizer of. I organized the first town hall event where we decided collectively that forming our own local Occupy 99% movement was necessary, was needed. We did that back on October 15th, 2011 here in Newark, and we called that group the 99% of Newark and East Central Ohio. Now, we had a rough, first 2.5 year start. But we finally came to a point where we realized what we had to do. Before we could address any of the myriad issues that we wanted to address, we had to first take care of money and politics and this notion of corporate personhood. Now, recently, as a culmination of what our group, which has recently also merged with the Move to Amend movement, at least for the time being, we call ourselves also Move to Amend Newark, Ohio. We recently got something done that we are very proud of. And it was published in what we accomplished recently was published in the Advocate on July 15th, Tuesday, and on page number 2, article by Joe Williams. It's on this side where I'm pointing. The article's title is Local Petitions Target Citizens United. And since I've read the story many times, and plus I know what happened, I'll just briefly tell you what we did. Roughly 10 of us, with 2 or 3 of us, depending on what time frame you look at. Sorry for all the interruptions. It's the second one. Anyways, I'm pretty sure you heard my son yelling at one point that there was someone knocking on the door. Anyways, I'll continue my thought. But roughly 10 of us, 2 or 3 members of those, depending on whether or not there was a volunteer from Columbus who was involved, because we had at least 2 volunteers from Columbus, 2 or 3 volunteers from Columbus, but one of those volunteers had MS. The other 2 more members who were regular participants also had MS. Anyways, it's one of those days. But yeah, roughly 2 members who were regularly active here suffer from MS as well, and the handful of us that there were, regardless of the insane winter that we had with the polar vortex, and oftentimes thinking we couldn't do it, we ended up submitting close to 1,800 signatures, and we needed just over 1,300. We don't know if we've made it yet, but what the signatures were for was to put an initiative on the ballot here in Newark for the citizens of Newark to determine whether or not we want the U.S. Constitution to be amended towards the ends that I mentioned earlier about money and speech and corporate personhood. And I bring this up because I truly believe that the only way this country is ever going to change is if we come together and try to change it. It's been said many times before by the president when he was running for office, and by I think it was Martin Luther King who originally said it. You are the change you're waiting for. You can't wait for someone else to do it. You have to rise up and do it yourself. There's not going to be a hero that comes along and does everything for you. Change comes about when the people come together and demand it. When you want inequality to be stopped, then rise up. Demand better. This is what I've been doing. Granted, I haven't been religiously active throughout this entire time. I've had some issues that have kept me from it. As you can see throughout this episode, I've been distracted. It's a small example. And I'm sorry for those interruptions again. But that's an example of what I've done. By all means, I have to ask you, what are you doing? Are you doing something to improve this country, to be the change you're waiting for? You know, this focus on inequality, it keeps being said that Occupy Wall Street helped bring it to the forefront. And of course, the media was quick to declare Occupy Wall Street dead. You know, they want to say, okay, it's done. But you know, all these Occupy movements, they're still around. Every one of them are. They're just under the radar because the media stopped caring about them. They're being a force in their locales, including my own. So, you don't have to get coverage from the media. Just start an effort. Be a part of an effort. Do whatever it takes to bring about change. Demand better. Enact. Thank you for listening. I'm droned on long enough. Distractions and all. I'll see you next time. Thank you.